Hello there, I'm Robert McKay. I am rebuilding my Whisky Basics playlist, which is the whole reason this channel exists to begin with. If I remember correctly, this is number 10. Whether it's 9, 10, 49, 29 million, well, there are only 36 total. Or will be when I rebuild it. I accidentally deleted all 36 original videos. That's the cloud in the silver lining. The silver lining is that these are all going to be better than the originals were. But the question and answer in this video, because I watch on the screen what the level in the glass is, I had to move the glass a tad bit. And I'm just going to go ahead and empty the bottle and be done with it. And it came up to be more than I expected, but it kills a bottle. The topic, the question and answer, I'm going to have to re-tilt the camera here. I thought so when I was pouring, I know so when I put the bottle down. You're still not seeing everything there is to it. But the question and answer, that's the format of the playlist, is, in this video, how do you read a whiskey label? Well, not upside down. Wait, they printed this upside down. Ah! But it's dead empty. And I have to tell you, I like Wild Turkey 101. I won't be buying an 8-year again. I will be buying the regular again. I think I'm the only person in the entire world who likes the regular Wild Turkey 101 better than the 8-year. But how do you read a whiskey label? Well, not like this. That's how you know it's whiskey. It is not how you read the label. Now, because of my thoroughly unprofessional setup, you saw thoroughly amateur, this is going to be somewhat awkward. I have learned that even when I put the bottle like this, you probably can still hear me. When I'm doing this, you can still hear me, so that's good. I put things down, you can hear that. So this has better sound pickup than my laptop. But it's not going to be professional. So how do you read a whiskey label? Well, first, you look at it. Duh. Yes, I'm a nutcase. If by now you haven't figured that out, hang around for a while. Eventually, the painfully obvious will make its way into your mind. I don't suffer from insanity. I enjoy it. But back to the subject. I've been nuts enough for now, I think, maybe. We have here this label, and the Wild Turkey brand is right there. The brand is not necessarily the same as the name of the distillery. In this case, it's the Wild Turkey Distillery. But you get Knob Creek whiskey, the distillery is Jim Beam. You get, oh, my brain is going blank now. You get Elijah Craig Bourbon, the distillery is Heaven Hill. You get, well, you get the point. Maybe I shouldn't belabor it too much. So, you're going to have the brand. The distillery may or may not accurately appear elsewhere on the label. In this case it does. Distilled and bottled by Wild Turkey Distilling Company, Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. You look at some bottles and it will have a completely fictitious distillery name. I guess it's a DBA, doing business as. The distillery is the Joe Jones Distilling Company. And they put out a brand of whiskey called Joseph J. Jones. Well, on the bottle, it might say distilled and bottled by the Joseph J. Jones Distillery. Well, it's actually the Joe Jones Distillery, but they'll do that. In this case, the name of the distillery is the same as the brand, Wild Turkey. It's nice to know the distillery. If you know that you like or don't like the brand, that's the main thing. Do you like Wild Turkey? If so, fine. If not, who cares who distills it, right? Well, it might matter. Some distilleries, all their products are more or less alike. But there are some distilleries that make wildly different stuff. For instance, going back to Jim Beam, they make Old Grandad and Knob Creek, a fruity and a dark, earthy whiskey, both from the same distillery. I recommend, especially for newbies, which this channel is aiming at, that you go by brand. If you're interested in the distillery behind the various brands, fine, not a problem. But if you like this brand, then you know when you see that brand you like it. If you don't like that brand, the same thing. Next we have, and I'm not going to go in strict order of what it's telling me, we have 101. That is the signature Wild Turkey whiskey. They have an 81 proof. If anybody ever drinks it, I don't know it, but apparently so because it's on the shelf. They have their rare breed. They have Kentucky Spirit. They have various others that go up in price and low and go down in availability. But 101, you see Wild Turkey, look for the 101. Now, if you are brand new to whiskey, 100 or 101 may be too much for you, because what that is the proof. Over here it says 50.5, and you're not, move the glass, 50.5 alc/volume. Alcohol by volume. Over here it has 750 millimeters and then 101 proof. When you see the 101, you see Wild Turkey 101, you know you're looking at a bottle of 101 proof whiskey. All whiskey by law has to have the proof on there. It does not have to be in terms of proof. Some distilleries only put the alcohol by volume. And if you're into YouTube whiskey channels at all, you know that a lot of people out there never talk about proof. They talk about ABV, alcohol by volume. I learned my terminology back in the 70s. I didn't start drinking whiskey, and if you've looked at, I think it's the 8th video, the Who Am I video, you know the whole story of me getting into whiskey. I didn't start drinking whiskey till 2021. I learned my terminology back in the 70s. I think in terms of proof, in terms of a fifth of whiskey, in terms of a quart or a pint. So when you come to the proof, it might not say such and such proof. If you want to know the proof, you take the alcohol by volume, multiply by 2. In this case, 50.5 times 2 is 101. If you have the proof, and you want to know the ABV, you divide by 2. 101 divided by 2 is 50.5. I heard my wife coughing. We'll see if it wakes her up. Doesn't seem to have. So that's that step. Then you have a description, and you'll find something similar on all whiskey bottles. I'm going to move the glass again. It says Kentucky. Well, let me just move it up. Maybe you can read it, maybe you can't. It flanks the 101, and it says Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. Every one of those words means something. Kentucky means that they made it and aged it and bottled it in Kentucky. It can be straight whiskey without a state. If, for instance, they made it in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, instead of Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, at the big MGP distillery, then shipped it in totes to Kentucky and aged it there, you could not call it Kentucky whiskey. Nor could you call it Indiana whiskey. It would simply be straight bourbon whiskey. And federal law requires that you say where you make it. I have seen labels that seem to be skirting the edge of what's allowable. They seem to not want to say that, well, our whiskey we're getting from X state. Not even X distillery, X state. But Kentucky means they made it, aged it, and bottled it in Kentucky. Straight. What is straight whiskey? That is a purely American designation. Straight whiskey means, and we'll get to bourbon in a moment, but this is bourbon, so it has to follow all the rules of bourbon. Reminds me of the James Bond movie, Goldfinger. Bond has deliberately put himself in a place where he can play a game of golf with Auric Goldfinger, and they agree, and this is going to be a terrible Sean Connery imitation, but they agree to play by what Bond calls strict rules of golf. And I've looked it up, and apparently, as you're playing golf, you can play more or less strictly, more or less loosely, according to the rules. Strict rules of golf would mean by the book, by the letter of the law. Well, there are rules of whiskey, rules of bourbon specifically. Straight whiskey has to follow all those rules, plus it can have no artificial color, no artificial flavor. The only permissible additive is pure water to bring it down to bottling proof. And it has to age at least 2 years. 1 year, 364 days. It's not straight bourbon. 2 years, it is. If it is between 2 years and 4 years, it must carry an age statement. So this is straight bourbon. It follows all the rules of bourbon plus those extra rules that I've just stated. And this is good bourbon. It's nothing spectacular. It's not, as I say, in my judgment, as good as the regular Wild Turkey 101. I mentioned an age statement. This is aged 8 years. If it's between 2 and 4, remember, for straight whiskey, it has to have an age statement. Above 4, it does not have to have an age statement. Some distilleries put an age statement on everything. Balcones Distilling does that. You know, if they had a 10-year whiskey, they would put on, they have an idiosyncratic style that I like. They would put on their label, aged at least 120 months in oak. That being 12 months per year times 10 years. But if for straight whiskey, if it's 4 years or older, it does not require an age statement, but certain more or less special releases do carry one even when they don't normally. The regular Wild Turkey does not have an age statement. It's straight whiskey, which, so we know it's at least 4. We can hunt around, find out information, but there's no age statement on the bottle. Here there is, because this is supposed to be a special, extra aged version of Wild Turkey 101. Therefore, it has the age statement. So we go back, Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. What is bourbon? What's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? Well, son, the difference between bourbon and whiskey is the difference between a Chevy and a car. But a Chevy is a car. Exactly. There is no, repeat no, I say again no, nail it down, no difference between bourbon and whiskey. Bourbon is whiskey. A Chevy is a car. Coca-Cola is a soda. Cotton or linen is a cloth. Hamburger buns are bread. Hopefully by now you're getting the point. If you are subscribed to this channel and you talk about bourbon and whiskey, you have not been listening to me, and I am unhappy with you. You have disappointed me. You should know better. The difference between bourbon and whiskey is exactly the same as the difference between scotch and whiskey. This is bourbon whiskey. Bourbon is just a variety of whiskey. Now, what makes bourbon different from other kinds of whiskeys? That's a valid question. That's a correct question. That's a question you certainly have a right to ask, and I have a right to answer. Bourbon, by law, can only come from the United States. Anywhere in the United States. My favorite bourbon, my favorite whiskey is from Texas. Balcones, Texas pot still bourbon. Only come from the United States. Must be at least 51% corn. Must age in a new charred oak barrel. Those are the 3 requirements that make bourbon. Now, if you follow those requirements, you don't have to call it bourbon if you don't want to. But bourbon is the distinctive American variety of whiskey. And I don't know of anyone who's making bourbon who doesn't put bourbon on the label. So when you see Kentucky Straight Bourbon, you know certain things about what's in the bottle. You know it's from Kentucky, which of course means that it's from the United States. You know it's at least 51% corn. You know it has no artificial colors or flavors. And then the last word here, whiskey. If I remember correctly, the very first video in this playlist is, what is whiskey? Whiskey is a distilled alcoholic beverage made from grain. That's the very basic definition. Now, under American law, if it's under 80 proof, it's not whiskey. You can't bottle it as whiskey. Under American law, my brain just went blank. If it comes off the still at more than 160 proof, it's not whiskey. That goes into vodka territory. Although there is a category called light whiskey, which is between 160 and 190 proof, if I remember correctly. Some people have tried this or that variety of light whiskey and say it's okay, or even good. Some people have tried it and said it's not good, that it lacks the robust flavor of whiskey. And at that kind of a high proof, the still is stripping out all the flavor that comes from the grain, and that's what vodka is. Vodka is liquor that comes off the still at such a high proof, whether in the initial column still distillation or after 2 or 3 or however many pot still distillations, it's stripped all the flavor out so that you have alcohol that is almost, if not totally, flavorless and odorless. And that's why vodka makes such a great mixer. It contributes alcohol but doesn't clash with any other flavors you might want to put in there. But whiskey doesn't have that extremely high proof. But it's made from grain. Now, since I was talking about vodka, you can make vodka from anything. Potatoes, corn, rice, barley, whatever. The end result is what counts in vodka. There's a distillery in Russia which makes vodka from sawdust. There is some sugar in wood. They somehow process the sawdust, get the sugar, the yeast eats it, produces alcohol, they distill it, and they get vodka. And apparently there are higher and lesser grades of vodka, but I would imagine that it would be hard to distinguish among specific brands unless they're flavored. But I keep trying to come back to whiskey. Okay, we've read most of this label. I mentioned earlier that whiskey has to tell you where it's from, and it's in very fine print along the bottom of the label. Distilled and bottled in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, USA. Is there anything else? There is, of course, a government warning, and if you're not being stupid, you don't have to worry about it. If you're being stupid, you're probably too stupid to read the label. A lot of whiskey labels will have information. Sometimes it's accurate, sometimes it's not. Of course, there's the barcode. Some of you watching may be, like me, old enough to remember when a cashier had one hand on the register and one hand on, and they could ring that stuff up accurately faster than these people go across the scanner. I've worked in retail since 2003, 22 years now. Beep, 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 or even some beep, beep. The others, cashiers aren't as fast, I think, as they used to be. And I'm at 26 minutes. I did not intend to be this long. Is there anything else on a whiskey label I need to talk about? Well, there's the amount in the bottle. There are various other things. Nobody puts a price sticker on anymore. It's all in the barcode. So that is how you read a whiskey label. I'm going to shift that over there. I'm going to pick this up. We're done for the night. An abrupt ending, I know, but not as bad as they were when I was first starting the channel. Here's how.